How you doing, Coach Travis here. This video I want to talk to you about what I consider the three biggest mistakes of a brand new grappler. Okay, and as I discuss these mistakes, I want you to realize that this is very common, very normal among people getting involved with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, with grappling. So it's nothing to feel bad about if you're guilty of these mistakes. This is something that everyone pretty much goes through. But when you recognize it, the sooner you can recognize that you're making these mistakes, the sooner you can correct them. So the first most common mistake that I see with a lot of people practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu getting started is they use way too much muscle, too much force trying to get the techniques done that they're learning. So for example, if I'm learning a cross choke or an arm bar, and I start setting it up and I realize, oh, I can't quite finish it the way I want to, instead of tightening up my technique, you know, getting started, I might just try to use a lot more muscle. I might just try to squeeze a lot tighter, really put all my effort into it, and maybe I'll get away with it, maybe not. But in the long run, you're not going to. All right. What happens is you get away with it a little bit at first. Okay, you go with somebody who you're bigger than, you're stronger than, you can pretty much manhandle. This happens sometimes, and you're able to get away with just using a lot of muscle. And that's a very bad habit to make because you think, oh, well, it worked this time, it's going to work with everyone. And it doesn't. In the long run, people learn the technique, they learn how to defend, and if you stick with that habit of trying to use too much muscle, you're going to have less and less success at the higher levels. The other problem with that is you can only sustain that type of force and energy level for a couple of minutes tops, and then you've completely gassed out. And unless you can go out and tap everyone out, in your matches in the first minute and a half or 2 minutes, you're going to be cooked. You're not going to be able to really finish the techniques. You're not going to be able to sustain that because you're using way too much energy. So let's make sure that we focus on gradually increasing our technique every day and using less and less muscle and force, focusing more on being technical. Okay. Second mistake is the opposite of that, is being too timid. Okay, being afraid to execute and go after certain techniques. And that's really the only way that you learn in jiu-jitsu, is by trying things and seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, seeing where you have to improve. So being too timid. A good example of this is I want to go for an armbar from the closed guard position, let's say. But in the back of my mind, I feel like, well, if I'm not successful, if I go for this armbar and my partner escapes, they're going to pass my guard. And I really don't want that to happen. So in order for them to not pass my guard, I'm just going to keep this position and try to make it a stalemate, because at least that way I get to keep it even. You really won't learn that way. You'll have a mentality of just trying to survive the match and get through it like that. You have to remember, training does not equal competition. Training means you should be walking out of the gym better than you were before you walked into the gym. So while you're training, that is the time to make the mistakes. Try different things. Don't be timid. Don't hold back. That doesn't mean go crazy and use all your muscle. It means experiment. Try the techniques that you've learned that maybe they're not quite that sharp yet, but you're going to learn by trying them. Learn by making the mistakes. Okay, so we don't want to be too timid. We want to go out, try to do these techniques. And the last thing really kind of ties the first two together as far as the three biggest mistakes is not fixing your mistakes. Now that seems kind of obvious, almost like I don't need to mention it, but what I mean by that is when you're aware that you're making a mistake, you're aware that you use too much muscle, or you're aware that you're too timid, you don't go for it, but you refuse to change. You refuse to step outside your comfort zone and try those things that, although you're not comfortable with it, you know they'll make you better. This might seem very obvious. You might just be saying, well, that's not going to be me. But I've seen this happen, guys that start off at white belt and they continue with this same attitude even as they progress. So they get better, they get more technical. You're going to get better no matter what. But you can get much better, much faster by consistently working on and correcting your mistakes. And this happens on a day-to-day basis. Okay, you come in, you train, you make a mistake, you become aware of that mistake, and the next day you make a point to correct it. That means you drill it the right way. You try it again, but you're going to try something a little bit different. Don't go back to the same old habits, all right? So that basically sums up what I consider the three biggest mistakes, okay? We want to try to avoid using too much muscle all the time. At first that's going to happen, but we gradually use more and more technique and yes, less and less muscle. We don't want to be too timid. We want to try things. We want to go for those techniques that we're not comfortable doing. We don't want to be afraid of, what's going to happen if we try something that doesn't work out. We need to go for it. And we need to correct our mistakes as we make them, because that is a normal part of training. That's a normal part of everyday life. We make mistakes. It's up to us if we decide to correct them or not. All right. So I hope this video has helped you out. Apply these strategies, and you're going to progress much faster.